This is Lamat Antropa. Welcome to the Q&A session with the Master of the Month within our Mastery Dojo. And today I'm honored to introduce to you Dr. Mort Orman. He is a physician specializing in internal medicine, but also for decades explored and wrote a number of books on self-mastery, mastery of emotions, and stress mastery. As you can imagine, that's exactly the topics we're going to explore today. Thank you so much, Dr. Orman, for being here with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. Good to see you again.
I also want to thank our members. If you want to ask questions, just raise your hand. There is the button at the bottom of the screen called React. I always joke about how Zoom should rename it Respond instead of React, because reactivity is exactly the recipe for stress. And I hope that we're going to explore some of that today. Dr. Orman, I would love to say just a couple of words about you. You are a world-renowned expert in emotional mastery. I know that you wrote over 24 books, I think 26 or something.
Yep.
That is an incredible number of books on mastery. And so Mastery Dojo is honored to have you. I hope that our members will benefit a great deal from what you have to offer. Please share with us what it is that you would like to share at our Q&A session. And of course, we will also have questions and answers too.
Yeah, well, I'll do a brief presentation just to provoke some deep thought and hopefully some questions as we go forward. The topic is, what if emotional intelligence isn't all that intelligent? What you're going to learn is why emotional intelligence is vital for all of us, why current emotional intelligence advice isn't all that intelligent, and what would true emotional intelligence look like, and how could you easily gain this for yourself? Obviously, we won't be able to teach that today, but we can talk about it, what it would look like, and how you could go about getting it. Again, my background, internal medicine physician, anger elimination, emotion mastery expert, 26 books. I also am the creator of National Stress Awareness Month every April in the US since 1992. So I have a nonprofit organization that sponsors that month. I'm a father, a husband, and also a marathon runner. I'm not running marathons anymore, but I used to when I was younger. So emotional intelligence actually hasn't been around all that long. It's been actually a little longer than 30 years before this book came out. But this was kind of the book that got it onto most people's radar screen by Daniel Goleman, who, by the way, I don't think was a mental health professional. I think he was a reporter, but he reported on psychology, and so he was familiar with the field. And the emotional intelligence industry has gone on since he gave it this boost. There are a lot of people talking about emotional intelligence, teaching stuff about emotional intelligence. And the question today is, how intelligent is all that talk and all that training and all that teaching and all that theorizing? Here are some of the emotions that I think we all would love to be able to master, that we deal with on a frequent basis: anger, guilt, fear, worry, frustration, sadness. So why should we want to master our emotions? Well, emotions are pretty important in our lives. They are the key to successful relationships. Emotions get triggered all the time in our interactions with people, whether it's personal relationships or business relationships. It's a key to personal health. I practiced medicine for 23 years and saw a lot of impact of emotions on people's health. And I also saw the other side. When people get sick, they often get very scared. They often have all kinds of fears and all kinds of worries, and sometimes anger, and all kinds of emotional things get triggered when you have health problems or people close to you have health problems. It's important for positive energy and drive. Our emotions can pull us down energy-wise, consume a lot of psychic energy, and deplete us of some positive energy and drive. Conflict prevention and resolution. Often you have to work through your emotions or keep your emotions from getting into play and causing things to get worse. When we get emotional, we often don't think as clearly. And there's some science behind that, is how the chemicals that get secreted affect the various areas of the brain for decision making. Workplace culture and environment. We think of work as more of a cerebral cognitive thing, but the emotional environment can be very important for the people working there. Let's look at current emotional intelligence real quickly. Some of the problems with it. There are a lot of multiple complicated theories, and often conflicting theories and opinions about emotions, where they come from, what they mean, what are different emotions or needs underneath. There's all these things swarming around that are very complex and make it very difficult for the average person to get their hands on the controls of their own emotions, because most of the time these theories don't translate into being able to master your emotions. Like I said, a lot of the advice is contradictory. And actually, it's been revealed recently that a lot of the emotions experts or previous emotion experts don't really understand emotions correctly. But particularly, there's a lack of the desired outcomes. And that's the main reason why I say emotional intelligence is not that intelligent, because if you put people in an environment where they're exposed to this emotional intelligence training that's available today, for the most part, it doesn't really improve their emotion handling experience a lot. Emotional intelligence has been very good for showing that people who do handle their emotions very well do better in life, and people who don't handle emotions very well do less well. There's evidence for that. However, the real question is, can you take a person who's not handling their emotions well and turn them into somebody who does? And that's where I think there's a big failing with current emotional intelligence as it's being currently taught. Lack of permanent improvement and change. I found this to be an amazing book, How Emotions Are Made, by Elizabeth Feldman Barrett. This is an incredible book. She's a brain researcher in Boston, and she's gone through a lot of the research about where emotions come from in the brain, how the brain produces them, and realized that either the science was bad, the studies were poorly designed, or they made mistakes in their assumptions. And a lot of the principles that we've been taught from a neuroscience standpoint are incorrect. This is a very detailed book. You have to be kind of neuroscience oriented, but if you are, this will really open your eyes to how little accurate understanding there is among most brain researchers as to where emotions actually come from. One of the key points here, they do come from the brain. And we are often taught in our society that emotions come from outside of us. You made me angry. You upset me. All that kind of stuff is how we've been taught to think about emotions. And in truth, that's wrong. Those are triggers. Those things are a part of the equation, and they do happen, and they do provoke our emotions. But were the emotions actually being created inside the brain? And this book gives you some really deep insights into what that process is like, how it happens, and that human emotions are unique. They may look like emotions in animals, but they don't get created the same way. Their expression may be similar, but the internal brain processes that create them are different in human beings because we live our lives in language. This book shows that a lot of emotions come from training, conditioning, and linguistic concepts are all baked into the pie that allow us to experience our emotions. So what would true emotional intelligence look like if it was being taught today? Which it's not, and one of my goals is to change that. You would need a simplified model of human emotions, something that anybody can understand, not this complex, convoluted stuff with a gazillion different conflicting ideas. You would need simple frameworks for pinpointing the internal causes. In other words, how does our brain make us angry? How does our brain cause other emotions? And I think it's possible to do that in very simplistic ways. Once you understand what's causing your emotions, what can you do with that understanding? If you get triggered to become angry, can you stop the anger very quickly? Or can you keep it from going on for days or weeks or years or pass it on to future generations? Can you end trigger emotions quickly? And also, over time, if you apply this methodology, can you stop getting triggered by things that your brain is already conditioned? Can you rewire your brain essentially so that things that used to trigger you don't trigger you? I started doing this work 40 years ago, discovered these principles, and things that used to bother me when I was younger and really trigger me like crazy, they don't bother me anymore. I can be in the presence of them, they can happen, and I have no reaction whatsoever to them because I've trained myself over time with looking at lots of different anger episodes in particular, how to rewire my brain with that. So here's an example of what I mean by a simple model of understanding human emotions. Use a computer analogy. You're sitting in front of your laptop or your computer, you have a keyboard and a monitor, you press the A key, the letter A appears on the screen. How did that happen? What caused that to happen? And most of us would use the obvious answer, which is, well, somebody pressed the A key. That's what caused it to happen, which is true as far as it goes. But then if I asked you, were there any other causes involved? and you thought about it for a moment, you'd realize that there are programs inside that computer which have to be there. And they're invisible. We don't see them, and we don't have to know anything about them unless you build computers or you write software. But as a user, we don't have to know anything about those programs. They're in the background, they're built in. And all we know is when we push the A key, there's stuff in the background that tells the computer to put the pixels on the screen in the A configuration, not in some other gibberish configuration. So that's how our computers work. Now, our emotions, not that we are mechanical machines, but we're like biologic machines as far as our emotions are concerned. When somebody pushes your anger button and anger appears in your body, it's a similar process. There are programs running inside your brain. Your brain is telling you how to look at a situation in certain very specific ways, and is telling you to believe that those perspectives are true. And if you buy into that and you believe it, which mostly we automatically do, then your body secretes the hormones and the chemicals and all the neurotransmitters and all the other stuff that produce the emotion. But it's basically due to how our brains tell us to look at a situation. It's not the situation itself. And we know this because you can have two people standing side by side experience the same exact external event, and one gets emotional, the other doesn't. So it can't be the external event. It has to be what's going on internally. So we know that intuitively. We just aren't being taught how to understand it more specifically. Every emotion is produced by the brain's filtering activity, where it presents certain aspects of reality to us and lops off a whole bunch of other stuff. It only shows us what it thinks it's important to keep us alive, or based on what our goals and purposes and projects in life are. And it'll give us perspectives that are very much reduced from what's actually happening in the real world, sometimes distorted, sometimes wrong. But if we believe they're true, we'll get the emotional response to them. And this is true for anger. It's true for anxiety, guilt, worry, frustration, sadness, jealousy, envy, any other emotion, including positive emotions that you want to look at. Usually you can boil it down to three main perspectives that your brain is giving you and telling you to look through, like they're filters. And when you do look through those filters and believe what you see, and don't realize that your brain is just sending you a less than accurate view of reality most of the time, then you get emotional. Now, the interesting thing about these, how our brain makes us emotional, is the perspectives it gives us do not have to be true. One or more of them may be false. You need all three to be true in order to get the emotion. And if you find that any one of them is not true, then the emotion will often go away. And this can happen for emotions that just got triggered a minute ago, or it can happen for things you've been emotional about for years and years. So this is an example just to show you how you can get very emotional from things your brain tells you that aren't really true. This is the story of Megan Phelps, who you may or may not have heard about. She was part of the Westboro Baptist Church in Topeka, Kansas, back in the late 1990s. And this was a big thing on the news at the time. This was a cult-like small religious group in Kansas. And they were a radical Christian hate group, and they really hated gays and any LGBTQ. They taught their followers that those folks were evil. They had no redeeming value whatsoever. They had lots of bad qualities, and they were just evil individuals. And they got famous because they would do protests at LGBTQ soldier funerals, and it made the news, and they got a lot of pushback and negative press for their rabid hatred of LGBTQ. Fred Phillips was the father figure of the religious group, and Megan was his daughter. From a very young age, her brain was programmed to believe these perspectives. And she believed them to the hilt. And she became a rabid activist against LGBTQ. And she was on television. She was a young kid, like 10 years old, running around leading protests, just really being very demonstrative with her dislike for that community of people. And she did this for over 10 years. And then in 2009, when Twitter came out, she said, oh, this is a great opportunity. I can get on social media. It's going to be a big thing. I want to get on here, and I'm going to start being an activist on social media, which is what she did. She started spewing her hatred, and she got a lot of hatred back in response. But something interesting happened. some of the people that she was taught to hate and taught to view as being evil individuals with no redeeming value started interacting with her in a nice way, despite all the hatred she was spewing at them. They didn't buy into it. They didn't take the bait. They just treated her nicely and fairly and calmly. And she was shocked. This blew her paradigm that she had been taught to believe and that she believed in so vehemently for many years. And she stayed away from these people, so she never got to know them or talk to any of them. But when she did through social media, she went like, oh my God, some of these people are really, really nice. There's nothing wrong with them at all. And eventually her whole structure in her mind that she built crumbled, and she eventually broke away from the church and said, I can't do this anymore. I can't support these beliefs anymore. And all that hatred that she had for years dropped away. So it's just to show you that when our brain tells us stuff that isn't true, it makes us believe it, or we have people around us that reinforce it constantly, you get the emotion and the persistence of the emotion. So when we're talking about mastering our emotions, it's basically no different than mastering any other domain. You need accurate or useful understandings that can help you accomplish whatever your goal is, whatever the behaviors are you want to exhibit, whatever you want to master. So you need to have accurate or useful understandings. You need to question mistaken assumptions and beliefs, and you need to get feedback from reality. So when you get a model that you want to try out and see if you can master, reality is going to tell you whether it's helpful or not helpful. It may not tell you if it's true or not, but it'll certainly tell you if it's helpful or not helpful. And then you can adjust. And that's part of the mastery process. You try things, you learn things, you get instruction from a mentor, you put it into action, and then reality will tell you where you need to correct and what's working and what's not working. And then you keep iterating until you get really good at whatever it is you want to be good at. You can do the same thing with emotions. And the key is being able to see the invisible causes that your brain is using to make you emotional. We don't normally see those, but you can be trained to see them. To me, that's been the key to emotional mastery. When I learned 40 years ago how to recognize or at least remember, okay, whenever I got angry, my brain just made me look at things in this way and this way. Whenever I got anxious, it made me look at things this way and this way. When you sort of have this X-ray vision where you can understand what your brain is doing and understand that your brain's a filtering mechanism and it often gets things wrong, leaves things out, missing context, missing information, then you can step in once you know the formula your brain's using and you can say, okay, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And a lot of times you'll find out, whoops, I think my brain may have misled me here or may given me a picture that isn't quite accurate. And then when you realize that, you go, oops, there's nothing to be angry about now. And the anger just drops away. You didn't have to punch a punching bag. You didn't have to take deep breaths. You didn't have to do Tai Chi. You just saw the situation more accurately than your brain originally told you how to look at it. And you go, oh, okay, nothing here to be angry about. And you can literally do that on demand. Anytime you get triggered, anytime you get angry, and you can do it with other emotions as well. It all stems from the knowledge of what your brain's doing that we can't see. And that's what I don't think we're teaching today. It's actually very teachable. I have a program, an 8-session program, and it only takes me 2 hours to teach people how to understand the internal causes of their anger and show them how to flush out that whole model and then how to use it in their life. And then we use it in the rest of the sessions. Let me stop the share here. And hopefully that may have stimulated some questions. I would be surprised if it didn't.
Well, that was a really nice introduction and also gave a great framework for not only understanding emotions, but understanding the whole topic of filters of perception, how we perceive our world and ourselves in this world through certain filters that may not always be true.
Yeah.
That's a major aspect of what I teach in practice. I see Suli has just raised her hand. Suli, please go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up.
Could you comment on the role of the heart? Is it to express what the brain's telling you as far as emotions go?
One of the things our brain likes to do is it likes to have us compartmentalize and separate things that aren't really separate. And then we think of them as separate. It's like the whole mind body idea. 2,500 years ago, that got started, and it's been carried forward ever since. And it turns out it was the wrong idea. The mind and the body are not two different things. Firstly, there is no mind. The brain and the body are not different things. They're part of a whole, and they're integrated. They're not separate. You can think of them as separate in the same way you can think of thoughts being one thing and emotions being another thing. They're not separate. They're intertwined. Your emotions affect your thoughts affect your emotions. It's all holistic and integrated. We tend to create these artificial divisions. Emotions involve your heart, they involve your brain, they involve your entire body, your skeleton, your bone marrow. When you get emotional, the whole thing gets activated. The whole body gets activated at the same time in so many complex ways. Even in modern medicine, we've only maybe understood 10% of what's going on in the body when things happen. So that's just another example of how our brain gives us false filters that then cause problems in our lives. So it's a great question because it reveals exactly what we're talking about here, is how our brain will often give us false ideas. And those false ideas will cause problems in our lives or get us hung up in understanding how things are really working. But the heart's obviously involved. You can't ignore that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I see Vera has just posted a written question. One has to be willing to question their own beliefs. And there is a big problem when people act on their hatred and are vindictive actors.
Yep. And that is a big challenge. Our brain wants us to be right, needs us to be right, tells us we're right. It's funny. My daughter was very young. We got this cute little toy. It was one of these concentration games where it had several boxes on the screen and you had to match two things. And when you did it correctly, the machine goes, "You are right."
Sounds
So
very
she's
much
playing
like
this.
these days.
Yeah, that's true. I was a forerunner of ChatGPT. But we're watching her play this game and she's getting good at it. And then she's going, "You are right. You are right." Even if she didn't have the toy to do that, her brain does that all the time. You are right. If you think about it, if you go back in evolution, your brain needed to keep you alive. That was its main purpose. And you had all kinds of threats around that were really dangerous. And you had to make these quick decisions. Should I run? Should I stay? Your brain needed you to make these quick either or decisions. And whichever one you landed on, it needed to make you feel confident that you were right so you could then act. So it was very invested in making you not just see things certain ways, but make you believe you were right in how you were seeing about things. And that's carried forward for hundreds of thousands of years or maybe more than that. So we all have brains that are stuck on being right. We want to be right. We feel good when we're right. And the truth is, biologically and neuroscience wise, we're wrong a hell of a lot of the time, but we don't want to admit it. And our brain just doesn't want to show you how wrong you are. It just wants you to keep thinking you're right, you're right, you're right. It's a very hard thing for most people. Plus, our identities get associated with whatever way we actually build our identity. We think we are X or Y or Z, and then we spend a lot of time collecting evidence being right about whatever the self-image we have is. So it feels like a fixed identity. It's not really fixed, but it behaves like it's a fixed identity. We built it by being right about whatever our self-concept, the stories we told ourselves about who we are, what we're capable of, what's the truth about us, what's in our heart. And so you build an identity that way. When someone comes along and says, the secret to emotions mastery is to be willing to recognize how wrong you are, how frequently you're wrong when you get emotional, you go, wait a minute, I don't want to hear that. There's a natural resistance to somebody inviting you into that kind of a program or that kind of an intervention where you say, I can teach you how to get rid of your emotions, but here's what you're going to need to be willing to do. You're going to be willing to admit when your brain made you wrong or it tricked you or it didn't show you the whole truth about something. And I have found over the years, I'm working with a lot of people, that there are a large number of people, if you walk on the street and pull people off the street randomly, a good percentage of them are going to give you the old, no way, Jose.
Well, and also probably depends on how stuck people are in their perspective. In other words, there is a certain degree of mental agility, if you will,
Yes.
that is associated with greater or lesser ability to associate or dissociate with their perspective. And those people who are particularly orthodox or stuck in their worldview or their belief system are less likely to be open to change. And
Yes.
if the person is not open to change, as they say, you can take horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. You can explain to them till you are blue in the face how emotions are often causing a misinterpretation of reality and how they are shooting themselves in the foot
Yeah.
by acting or reacting emotionally, and they still will not budge.
Well, it's funny, and I am very sensitive to that. When I bring somebody in or invite someone to come into my 8 session coaching program, I'll start off in the beginning, I'll try and get them to not do it. I'll preface it by saying, look, here's, I want you to know, before we get started, I want you to know where this train is headed. Okay. I want you to know the goal is to help you really master your emotions or your anger or whatever emotion we're focused on. But the way you're going to do that is the same way I did it 40 years ago. And what I discovered 40 years ago that freed me as far as the emotional troubles I was having back in my 20s and 30s, I realized that whenever I got angry, one of two things was true, always. I was either wrong about something, in other words, my brain had made me wrong about something, or had adopted a bad philosophy about life, which is just another way of being wrong about something. For example, if you believe life should always be fair, you're going to get pissed off when it's not. And the reason you get pissed off is not because life did anything wrong when a tornado came and blew your house down. It's not that life did anything wrong. It's that you had this expectation that should never happen. And that's a bad philosophy. Bad stuff's going to happen. The world's going to do what it does. And you can't expect everything to be perfect or to go the way you want it to go. That's a bad philosophy in life. And if you have that philosophy, you're going to have a lot more anger than someone who doesn't. I tell people that this is where this program's going. My job is to show you where every time you get angry, your brain made you wrong about something. And you can't see that right now, but that's what I want to show you. Now, if that would really be troublesome to you, in other words, if you're allergic to the truth, then this program's not for you. It will just upset you. Another myth we have in society today is our emotions are telling us what's true. If I feel really strongly about something, it must be true.
Mm.
And given what we're talking about today, the exact opposite is more likely to be true. Where did the emotion come from in the first place that you're banking on as telling you what's true? It came from some probably problematic ideas that your brain gave you in the first place that probably there's some untruths in there somewhere. You may have to dig deep to find them, but they're probably in there. And so your emotion got created from untruths. So how can it be the basis of what's true? But that's actually a trick that the brain uses. The brain tricks us in three main ways when we get emotional. First, it gives us filtered views of reality and makes it look like it's actual reality.
Nation of sorts.
The brain says, "So what are you talking about? There's no filtering going on." It's like if you ask the news media, are you biased? And they say, we're not biased. What are you talking? We're objective. That's what your brain does the same thing. It says, what are you talking about? There's no filtering going on. I'm showing you real life. This is what's happening. Okay. So that's the first way it tricks you. The second way it tricks you is it says, everything I'm telling you to look at and believe is true. You can trust me. I'm your brain. I wouldn't lie to you. Okay. It makes you believe, it gives you filtered realities, and then it makes you believe the filtered reality are true, so you won't want to question them. The last thing your brain wants you to do is question them. Okay. If you think about it, millions of years ago, you're out and about and there's some rustling in a bush and it could be some kind of an animal that's about to eat you. You don't want nuance in that situation. You don't want to think of 30 different possibilities. You want to get the hell out of there as fast as you can, whether it was the wind rustling it or whether it was an animal. You don't care. Your brain wants you to get out so you can live to play another day. So it doesn't like nuance and doesn't like multiple possibilities. It wants you to just one thing, it's this, and believe me, and act. And then here's the third thing your brain does. If you ever watch Star Trek, there's the Romulan maneuver where if you tried to attack a Romulan spaceship in Star Trek, it would immediately throw up a protective shield so you couldn't attack it. Okay? Your brain does the same thing. For example, it makes you angry in the two ways I just talked about. It makes you angry, And then it tells you that the feeling of anger means that it didn't trick you, that what you're seeing is true. So it creates this shell around the filters so that you wouldn't dare question them. Okay. It's just another, it's like a fail safe in case the first two didn't work. You won't go near questioning because your emotion is telling you, well, if emotions told us what was true, that would be a good rational conclusion. But as we're talking, our emotions, including our heart, sometimes tell us what's true and sometimes lead us way astray. Speaking of the heart, for example, do you ever start a relationship with someone and they look fantastic and you're over your heels in love and you can't see any flaws and they're perfect and you want to spend the rest of your life? That's your brain spinning reality for you, giving you this very rosy picture of the other person and their character and their makeup. And then as time goes on, you get to see reality.
I thought you
The heart told you in the first place, this is a perfect person, this person with no flaws, this is a person who's going to be loyal, this is a person you can trust, this is a person who's going to be honest and truthful and keep their promises and be a great partner in life. And your brain's telling you all this stuff and saying, believe me, and you do. And then you get infatuated and then you get into a relationship and then you find out what the truth is. And sometimes the person is a great person and you got really lucky. Relationship lottery. It's really, you can't separate the heart and the brain. They're all together.
heart mind, as they say it in Chinese, Shen. That's actually really cool because I see a lot of connections between the content of what you're sharing and some of the principles of energy arts that most of the folks in our community study, such as Qigong or Tai Chi or other things. And Vera is asking a follow-up question. Does the belief affect genes from generation to generation?
I know there's a lot of people who have theories about that. I'm not sure we really know, or that we, at this, with our technology available today, I don't even know that we could know the answer to that. We could certainly generate lots of theories and lots of evidence to support one point of view or another. But there are a lot of things in life right now that we just can't understand and know with our brains and with the additional assistive technologies that we have for understanding things. There's still a lot of I don't know what I don't know kind of stuff running around. That's where you have breakthroughs and miracles because we kept stepping into that where we get new insights that came out of like nowhere or new technologies that came out of like nowhere that open up new avenues of understanding that we didn't have before. But it's still a drop in the bucket compared to what we need.
Going back to the Star Trek,
Yeah.
one of the interesting characters in most of the Star Trek episodes is Lieutenant Data, who eventually became a commander and then the captain. He was a droid of some sort that didn't operate on emotions. So, what would it be like if more people were like him?
We tend to think that the way we operate in life is logical. We make decisions based on logic and reason. Neuroscience has shown us that's a lie. We make them unconsciously and emotionally. And then we create rational explanations for why we did what we did. But again, we tend to think that we're living in a rational way of being when a lot of it is emotional, and emotions are very important. Now, I can say this from experience. When I was trained to be a physician, we were trained to just ignore our emotions. Emotions would get in the way of being able to function as a physician. The patients that came to us were often extremely emotional. They were sick, they were worried, they were scared, they were angry, frustrated, whatever. They were often tremendously emotional, but we had to delete emotions from the picture and be very rational actors. So I went to 7 years of boot camp where I learned to just ignore my emotions. It actually was like they weren't even there and they weren't even important in terms of my functioning as a physician. It's humanly possible to do that. Now, I realized that there was a cost in that. It helped me be a physician, but then in personal life, I paid a price for that. And a lot of doctors do, other health professionals do. And then again, when you read Elizabeth Feldman Barrett's book, she talks about that too, that emotions are the basis of what we do and how we make decisions. A lot of what we do are all run by emotions, so you don't want to get rid of them. But when they're causing problems, And when I talk about eliminating anger, let's say, I don't mean eliminating anger. I mean eliminating unwanted anger or problematic anger or anger that's causing trouble in your life. I'm not
Unjust.
saying get rid of all anger because there's sometimes anger is very useful and very beneficial in certain situations in a person's life. So it's not that anger itself, you want to all get rid of anger. Where anger is causing problems in your relationships, with your health, with your family, with your kids, with your job, with your self-image, you're getting angry at yourself, you're tearing yourself down, you're diminishing your own possibilities in life through all this anger stuff. That's when you want to get rid of that kind of anger because it's not serving you, not helping you be the best you can be or accomplish whatever it is you're up to accomplishing.
Is it similar to what is often referred to as anger management?
No, anger management is mostly symptom reduction. Most of the time, it doesn't get at the causes. What I'm talking about here, the causes are in your brain and you can address them, but they're invisible. It's not that they're difficult to understand. It's just that we don't walk around. We're just not aware that our brain just did that to us. When you get angry, you don't go like, oh, my brain just made me look at things in A, B, and C ways. But that's what it did. And you can learn that. And actually, I teach people how to write those things down on an index card so that it gives you that x-ray vision. So whenever you get angry, you don't have to rack your brain anymore about why did I get angry? I wonder why I got angry. Is there something underneath the anger and have I unmet needs? No, you got angry because your brain told you to look at something in these exact three ways. Pull out your card and you'll see exactly what your brain just did to you. Now go question those things as to whether they're true or not and see what you discover and what happens to your emotions when you do that over and over again.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that many people who experience anger don't start questioning why am I angry, but
Correct.
rather other people around them start questioning why are you so angry or why are you so hard to be around, or they just get fed up with anger and leave. Anger is often not being recognized as the cause of issues, but rather as something that other people either point their fingers and say, you are angry, what's wrong with you? Or just simply disconnect and run away because they can't handle.
Yeah, but the nice thing about today is we now know what's wrong with them. We know that their brain is tricking them and they don't know it. The other thing is other people intuitively understand that how you're viewing the world isn't correct. That's making you angry. You're seeing things in certain ways and they're sensing that's not what really happened. That's not what they really said. That's not what they really meant. That's not what their motive was. They instantly know that you're getting angry for something where your brain made up some fantasy or some explanation or some understanding that's not true. So they're really looking at you like there's something wrong with you. And there is something, well, it's not wrong. It's the way the brain works. So it's all working perfectly. But there's something wrong in that your understanding of where your anger comes from. And that could be really helpful to you if you really understand why you're getting triggered all the time and having all this anger at other people and not recognizing how your own brain is creating it. And not just that it's creating it. That's the first step. Second step is exactly how it does it. You know, how is it telling you to look at situations that produces each emotion that you're having trouble with or causing problems in your life?
Yeah, one of the things that I studied when I was exploring neurolinguistic programming, a pattern interrupt. There
Mm-hmm.
is a certain mechanism that triggers the emotional reaction, and then it has a certain cascading effect. And if you interrupt that pattern, then it doesn't happen. A person learns how to interrupt their cascading of reactivity and then justification, trying to protect themselves from criticism or whatever. That basically will change how they behave and how they function.
Yeah. There's plenty of techniques and strategies for how to reduce the reactivity and keep the anger from causing more problems in your life. And that's fine. Some of those work great, some of them not so great. This is just another approach which is more directed at the causes in the first place than the downstream ramifications and consequences and problems that can occur once you get triggered. And then what you do with that, how you respond, how you talk to people, whether you act out on the anger. Once you get angry, there's a zillion different ways that anger can be expressed, some positively, some not so positively. But that's all downstream from you got triggered in the first place. Do you understand why that happened?
Would
understand
it be
what your
fair,
brain did.
would it be fair to say that ego plays a significant role in the emotional reactivity?
In the sense that the ego wants you to be right. So the brain gives you the filters, and then the ego says, yeah, they're true.
Right.
By the way, does everyone know that the news media can make people angry whenever they want to? And they're very good at it. And it's actually part
Because
of the business model.
you are going to be consuming the media if you're angry.
That's why they want you to get angry because they make more money. They're the pros. Look at the media. They'll tell you how to make people angry. And how do they make you angry when they tell you certain stories? They give you the same formula that your brain uses to make you angry when the media is not around. They understand what that is. They understand how to feed into it, and they structure their stories in such a way that it produces that emotion in you. Same thing with fear. If they want to make their other emotion, that favorite emotion is fear. If they want to think the world's coming to an end, they'll tell you a story that feeds into the way your brain creates fear and anxiety. And they're very good at it. They know the human brain. And they've had a lot of experience testing out their theories to realize what hits, what makes people emotional, and what makes them buy and click and get all excited. But it's the same thing we're talking about here. They just understand it because it's part of their business.
Of course, the politicians, that's part of their job description. Just watch Wag the Dog movie.
And the politicians can't tell you the truth, right?
Well,
As a politician, the worst thing you do is tell the truth because percentage of your constituency is going to hate you for it. It's like they've learned you can't go anywhere near the truth. So everything they tell you is psychobabble. It's crap. It's made to seem like it's the truth when it isn't even anywhere close most of the time. Again, not all the time, but these are generalizations.
I see Garth wrote a question. I have lived in 3 different countries. What about cultural belief? Currently, I'm living in a country which is different to my country of birth. Well, I can certainly relate to that, Garth, because I've lived in many different countries, more than 3, and I certainly do not live in the country of birth because that's Ukraine. It's a really good country to stay away from right now.
Remember, emotions in humans are not generated in the same way emotions in animals are generated, even though they may look the same in terms of their expression. They're coming from different processes in the brain. And our emotions come from conditioning. Every culture has the capacity to make you think in certain ways, believe certain things, favor certain things, values, all that kind of stuff get incorporated into you. And that all plays a role in your emotions. But what's interesting is take people from any culture, when they get angry, the brain's doing the same thing in terms of the formula that it uses to make you angry. Now, it may be feeding different cultural perspectives into that mix to make it relevant to you, but it's everybody who gets angry. If you get angry in Russia, the brain's doing the same 3 things if you get angry in America. If you got angry 1,000 years ago, the brain did the same thing that our brains do today when we make us angry. It's always the same 3 things. I've been doing this for over 40 years with myself and countless other people, thousands of different examples of people having anger in their lives, and it always comes from your brain giving you 3 stories, only 3 stories, and then all the other stuff can fit underneath them. They're kind of like high-level umbrella stories. You can have all kinds of different variations of what triggered you and why it triggered you and how your culture made it trigger you and how your past history made it trigger you. But it's still ultimately going to boil down to those 3 stories. You can learn them, and then that gives you the X-ray vision to know every time you get angry or somebody around you gets angry, oh, I know what their brain just did to them. Or I know what my brain just did to me.
And as you pointed out, there's a similarity between cultural traits that affect our emotions. I would venture to say that religions do the same thing.
Yep, that's part of culture.
I have a degree in cultural anthropology. I studied cultures and religions. There's indoctrination that happens no matter what culture or religion we're talking about. There's a certain mental framework that is being imposed or indoctrinated or brain, if you will, and that creates the filter of perception.
That's why human emotions are not the same as animal emotions. Dogs don't get religious indoctrination.
That would be creepy.
Lions and tigers don't get indoctrinated. They just have raw, unadulterated biologic emotions, but we
But they can,
complicate.
dogs can be trained to
Yeah.
attack
Yeah.
strangers, xenophobic dogs.
Yes. Oh, well, I take that back. They can be conditioned.
There you go.
You get a house pet, you don't do nasty things to it, and it's just a nice, docile animal. You take a bone away from it, and it starts to get upset. It's not doing that because it was religiously conditioned to have some deep philosophic objection to what you did. It's just,
Most religions are based on rather superficial manipulation, triggering people's emotions, such as devotion, faith, and things like that, that
yeah.
are not substantiated by anything other than hallucinations. It leads to people believing and feeling like they have to believe into something. If anything contradicts their belief, they would much rather reject the evidence
Yes.
because the belief is more important to them than the truth.
It may seem like it's not that difficult a thing to take a single belief and challenge it or question it. But the truth is that single belief is connected to 1,000 other beliefs.
It will slow unraveling if you dismiss.
If you let yourself admit that belief was wrong, it would call into question a lot of other beliefs, and your whole identity would be at risk. Brain goes fear. It's almost like loss of life. Loss of identity is like loss of life. So there's all kinds of psychological barriers, denial, all kinds of things where we don't want to question what our brain's telling us, and we don't normally do it. But you can do it. We have other parts of our brain that we can use that can supersede that, but you have to really want to do it and get good at doing it. Again, it's not a skill set that's normally taught in schools most of the time, but it's something we learn in our extracurricular education like this, where we go
Right.
to a dojo somewhere and we learn some skills.
Well, as a matter of fact, that's exactly what I teach in practice. It's questioning identity, wiggling it a little bit so it becomes a little bit less stuck, and then introducing the recognition that identity is flexible and can be fluid, and it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be this fixed way of being that most people think this is who I am. And
Yeah,
if their sense of identity becomes more fluid and flexible, then they become susceptible to change. And that's essentially why people come to me. They want to change.
yeah,
But most people are not ready to change. So they need to experience some loosening of the grip that identity has on their sense of who they are. That loosening of the grip then leads to acceptance. Okay, maybe I'm not who I think I am.
yeah,
Essentially, we never are who we think we are. And it's always the delusion or illusion, as I say.
yes, because it's always who we could become.
And what we think we are is just the tip of the iceberg compared to who we really are.
Share a
Yes,
story with you? Yeah.
please.
Remember I said I'm a marathon runner in the beginning of it?
Yeah.
So I didn't used to be a marathon runner. I used to hate running. I used to think running was the most uncomfortable, unpleasant activity in the world. I knew how bad it felt to go to a high school track and run 4 times around and do a mile, and I would feel terrible. My identity of myself is I am not a runner. My idea of people who run long distances is they belong in insane asylums because they're obviously masochists. I don't understand how anybody can run a marathon. I mean, that's like torture. That was my identity for many years. All right. And then I started doing personal development work. I got the idea one day, what if everything that I believe about running isn't true? And what about everything I believe about myself as a runner, a person who possibly could enjoy running? I want to test out this personal development stuff to see if it actually works. I'm going to see if I can change my identity as a runner. And I'm going to create a project and I'm going to sign up to run a marathon, which was like the craziest decision I ever made in my life. And I'm going to use it as an opportunity to try to understand, is it running or is it me? Or am I just making it miserable and I don't know how I'm doing that? And it turned out it wasn't running. It was me. It had been me all along. I hadn't seen it. And eventually, as part of this project, I did some things to change how I approach running, and I was able to stay in the game. And I started discovering things almost every time I went out for a run about, oh my God, I didn't realize when I think this way, the running gets harder, or my body leans this way. Oh, I was making all these associations and stuff that I never saw before. And as I saw them, I would be able to make a correction. And eventually running got easier and easier. And eventually I ran my first marathon. And when I crossed the finish line that day of the first marathon I ran, I literally felt like I had just touched down on the moon. That's how absolutely unbelievable that accomplishment from where I was in my identity and my views of running to where I had just come is like life shattering. And it came from understanding how my brain was screwing the whole thing up and making running a miserable experience. And as a result of that experience, I created a course for people who hated running. So I could teach them what I'd learned about how your brain makes you hate running when you don't need to, where it's not running's fault, it's your fault. And the course was amazingly successful. I went on and I ran 5 more marathons, 2 Boston marathons. I ran 2,000 miles a year for 25 years in a row until I developed a back problem and I couldn't do it anymore. But I became like this passionate runner. I loved running. When I went to a new city, I would start driving around. So this is a good running route. This would be a good running route. It's like who I was, my identity went from I hate running, I'm not a runner, runners are crazy, to I'm a runner and I love it. It's fantastic. And I want more of it. And I'm really sad that I can't do it now, but I'm still a runner, even though I only can walk now. But when I'm walking, I'm a runner walking. Other people here have had similar experiences, a big identity shift to something you thought you were, you might have believed you were. For example, I hated writing. I would never be a writer. 26 books. Where'd that come from? Well, things happen, things change. And I'm like, oh my God, writing is fun. Again, the point you're making is identity is actually fluid. Even what looks like a very well-established, grounded, evidence-based negative identity of yourself is actually, in truth, flexible if you have the right way of discovering that it's not the truth.
Pretty much everything that we know about ourselves and about the world is based on certain preconceived ideas and figments of imagination that, under scrutiny, fall apart. And so that's one of the key principles of Buddhism, that life is based on illusion, that we're basically
Yep.
operating on a lot of incorrect assumptions. And if
Yep.
we continue operating on those assumptions, we continue suffering because that's what those assumptions lead us to.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think that you, my friend, created a secular example of Buddhist thought put into good use by a physician
Yeah.
without even thinking that you were doing it. You basically created a modern version of what Buddha Shakyamuni did 2,500 years ago, create the way of dispelling ignorance and discovering how to live life free from suffering. That's
Yes.
fantastic.
Remember, Freud was a neurologist,
And
based medical doctor.
yeah, Barbara is asking, please give the name of the book Dr. Orman recommended.
How Emotions Are Made by Elizabeth Feldman Barrett.
Okay, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Such a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Orman. And once again, I want to thank all our viewers for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next time we have Master of the Month session.